The universal library of Xylos was not a place of books, but a silent, crystalline nexus of all recorded knowledge from every cooperative species in the galaxy. Its archivists were a sentient species known as the Lumen, beings of slender form and translucent skin, through which faint, calming internal lights pulsed. They were pacifists, scholars, dedicated to the serene accumulation and understanding of data. Emotion, to the Lumen, was a fascinating but often disruptive phenomenon observed in other species. Conflict was an equation that always resulted in net loss, and humanity, a relatively new entry into the galactic community, was a puzzle. The Lumen, in their detached way, were particularly perplexed by humanity's deep and abiding fascination with horror. This genre of entertainment, dedicated to invoking fear, revulsion, and existential dread, seemed utterly counterproductive to societal well-being. To the Lumen, who sought harmony and enlightenment, humanity's creation and consumption of simulated terror was a sign of psychological immaturity, perhaps even a latent instability. Liaison Thuron, a junior archivist with a particular interest in emergent species psychologies, found humanity's predilection for horror the most compelling. Their cognitive processes dedicate significant resources to simulating threats that do not exist, Thuron explained during a presentation to the Senior Archive Council, its internal lights pulsing with earnest curiosity. They call it entertainment. Understanding this horror pathology could provide unique insights into their developmental trajectory and potential for integration into more harmonious galactic norms. Chief Archivist Lyra, whose own lights shone with the steady, ancient glow of profound knowledge, considered Thuron's proposal. The creation of fear stimuli for recreational purposes is indeed anomalous, Lyra conceded, her voice a soft chime. A controlled study could be illuminating, but we must approach with caution. The human psyche appears to possess a high tolerance for even an attraction to stimuli that other species would find severely distressing. And so, a delegation was approved. Thuron, brimming with academic anticipation, Lyra, providing oversight and gravitas, and Krell, a xenopsychologist specializing in non-lumen emotional spectra. They formally requested from Earth's cultural attaches a curated selection of humanity's most impactful and representative horror media. The humans, flattered by the scholarly interest, readily complied, sending terabytes of data. Literature, films, interactive simulations, games, and even musical compositions noted for their unsettling qualities. The Lumen delegation established a secure study chamber within the library, insulated from the main data streams to prevent any emotional leakage. Their first foray was into human literature. They analyzed the bleak, cosmic dread of an author named Lovecraft. Thuron noted, the narratives posit entities of immense power and utter indifference to sentient life. The fear derived is existential, a sense of insignificance. Krell added, human subjects report a thrill from this perceived insignificance, a paradox. They moved to films. Grainy footage of figures with knives stalking hapless victims elicited a logical assessment of predator-prey simulation. Visceral-laden body horror caused Krell to dim its internal lights slightly. The human fascination with the fragility and mutability of their biological forms is pronounced, it observed. Thuron diligently catalogued the tropes. The jump scare, the slow burn of dread, the monster reveal. They were, the Lumen agreed, crude but effective methods of stimulating the human amygdala. Next came the interactive simulations, video games. Here, the archivists experienced a more direct, if still detached, understanding of the human experience. They navigated shadowy corridors, solved cryptic puzzles to avoid grotesque creatures, and witnessed narratives of inescapable doom. Krell, observing recordings of human players, noted elevated heart rates, perspiration, vocalizations of fear, yet a persistent drive to continue. They willingly subject themselves to prolonged stress, Thuron. It's not just passive consumption, it's active participation in their own discomfort. Thuron, while intellectually processing the data, began to feel a faint, unfamiliar resonance. Not fear, for a Lumen did not truly fear in the human sense, but a disquiet. a subtle wrongness that tickled the edges of its serene consciousness. Lyra, ever observant, noticed the slight flicker in Thuron's usually steady light patterns. The human capacity for creating such vivid negativity is indeed potent, she chimed, a note of something unreadable in her voice. The turning point came when they accessed a game highly lauded by human critics for its psychological horror. It wasn't about sudden shocks or graphic violence. It was about a creeping, insidious wrongness, a world that subtly bent the rules of reality, and an entity that was hinted at more than shown, a being of impossible geometry and thought-shattering influence. As Thuron navigated the simulated protagonist through a decaying, reality-warped institution, Lyra's internal lights suddenly flared, then constricted to mere pinpricks. She emitted a soft, sharp sound, a lumen equivalent of a gasp. "Pause the simulation, Thuron," she commanded, her voice losing some of its usual melodic quality. Krell and Thuron turned to her, their own lights pulsing with inquiry. Lyra was staring at a particular symbol that had appeared on a wall in the game, a spiraling, multi-angled sigil that seemed to hurt the eyes to look at directly. "That marking," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. "Access Universal Library Archive, classification. Omega Red, sealed file Kappa 7 Lambda." Thuron and Krell exchanged glances. Omega Red classifications were the highest secrecy level in the library, reserved for threats deemed existentially catastrophic, information so dangerous that even most archivists were barred from knowing of their existence. Only chief archivists and the highest echelons of Lumen governance had access. With trembling appendages, Lyra inputted her access codes. A section of the chamber wall shimmered, revealing a stark, isolated data node. The file opened. It was not text, not images in the conventional sense, but a multisensory data packet designed to convey the core essence of the threat. It spoke of an entity known only as the Unraveler of Forms, a being from a higher dimensional plane that had, in an almost forgotten galactic epoch, breached realities. It didn't conquer or consume in a way most species understood. It unmade. It warped perception, shattered sanity, and then dissolved civilizations, their worlds, their very histories, into chaotic, meaningless data. The symbol from the game, the spiraling sigil, was prominently featured in the Omega Red file. It was one of the few recorded visual markers associated with the Unraveler's incursions. Thuron's internal lights dimmed to a muddy gray. But how? That game was created by humans only a few Earth years ago. The Unraveler, that file is millions of years old, sealed. No human could possibly know of it. Krell, the xenopsychologist, began to connect horrifying dots. "They're monsters," Thuron, Lyra, review the other files. "The shambling dead they depict in so many narratives, the loss of individuality, the hunger, the infectious spread. It bears disturbing parallels to the Cathar mind plague of the seventh galactic cycle. The shadow parasites from their folklore that possess individuals, strikingly similar to the sentient mimetic viruses documented after the fall of the Cerulean Empire." Lyra, her voice strained, navigated further through the curated human horror. A slasher film's antagonist, an unstoppable masked killer who seemed to embody pure, relentless malice. It was a chilling echo of the last berserker of Kral, whose rampage had sterilized 3-star systems before it was finally neutralized. A literary description of a creature that lived in reflections and stole identities mirrored, with sickening accuracy, the long-suppressed reports of the looking glass entities from the void periphery. It wasn't just one or two coincidences. It was a pattern. Humanity's darkest nightmares, their most imaginative monsters, were not mere figments. They were echoes, distorted reflections, subconscious memories of actual cosmic horrors that the galaxy had faced, barely survived, and desperately tried to forget. The Universal Library held the official records, sanitized, classified, buried. Humanity held the raw, visceral, emotional truth of them in their fiction. "Earth isn't a cradle of primitive fears," Krell stated, its internal lights flickering erratically, a lumen sign of extreme distress. It's a repository, a subconscious record of galactic trauma. Their horror isn't imagination, it's resonance. The true oh shit Revelation solidified when they analyzed some of the newest, most avant-garde human horror creations, experimental films, obscure online collaborative fiction projects. These contained depictions of threats so bizarre, so alien, that even Lyra could find no corresponding entry in the entire Universal Library, not even in the deepest, Omega Red archives. Thuron, whose academic curiosity had long since curdled into a profound and terrifying awe, vocalized the implication. They are not just remembering past horrors, Lyra. Are they? Are they somehow sensing new ones? Emerging ones? Is their imagination a form of precognitive warning system for the entire galaxy? The Lumen delegation returned from the study chamber changed. The steady, serene pulses of their internal lights were now often disrupted by anxious flickers. Thuron no longer spoke of human horror pathology, but of unfathomable psychic attunement. Krell dedicated its research to understanding how a species could not only tolerate such proximity to existential dread, but actively cultivate it. Lyra, bearing the weight of her new understanding, addressed the Senior Archive Council. Her report was stark and sent ripples of disbelief and dawning horror throughout the assembled Lumen. Humanity's fascination with horror is not a sign of instability or immaturity, she stated, her voice heavy. It is, we believe, an unconscious racial mechanism. They are, in essence, the keepers of forgotten horrors. Their creative minds tap into a collective subconscious, not just of their own species, but perhaps of the galaxy itself, reflecting the terrors that have been, and more chillingly, the terrors that might yet be. Their fictional monsters are terrifyingly, presciently real in their underlying nature. The Universal Library reclassified Earth. It was no longer just a minor developing homeworld. It was now designated Sector 7G, Solar. Potential existential threat monitor slash subconscious early warning system, caution. High mimetic contagion of dread. Galactic policy towards Earth didn't change overtly. The humans remained blissfully unaware of their new, terrifying designation. But among the species who had access to the Lumen's report, a new understanding dawned. Humanity, with its gory movies, its terrifying games, its books filled with unspeakable things, was not seen as primitive anymore. They were viewed with a mixture of cosmic dread, profound respect, and utter confusion. They were the species that stared into the abyss, not just for themselves, but perhaps for everyone. They were the children who remembered the monsters under the bed, because, in the vast, dark bedroom of the galaxy, those monsters were all too real. And humanity, in their strange, terrifying way, might be the only ones consistently, even joyfully, checking to make sure they hadn't crawled out yet. A new legend began to circulate in hushed whispers among the stars. Do not dismiss the nightmares of the humans, for they have seen the shape of true darkness.